They called it a family trip, but from the first mile, it felt more like a final warning. One last forced bonding experience, my mother said, before the real world swallows you whole. But it wasn't really about togetherness. It was about control, her last attempt to script my life the way she wanted, before I slipped too far from her grip. I had just turned 22, barely holding things together, after dropping out of state college during my second year. I worked part-time at a Starbucks on the edge of town, picked up late-night shifts cleaning Airbnbs, and took online courses in trauma recovery, just to remind myself I still had choices. But to my parents, I was nothing but unfinished business. Dead weight with a diploma that never arrived and no real job title to brag about at family dinners. We borrowed a beat-up Chevy Suburban from a neighbor. My dad grumbled about the gas mileage the whole time, while Ricky, my younger brother, live-streamed the trip from the back seat, showing off his new haircut and flexing his biceps in the reflection of his sunglasses. Mom packed snacks for everyone, trail mix beef jerky, even individual peanut butter cups. Everyone but me. When I reached for a bag of pretzels, she snapped, "That's for Ricky." "You'll be fine, Elena. You're not exactly starving." They laughed. Ricky leaned forward from the third row, phone still in his hand, and added, "Girl lives on iced coffee and trauma. She doesn't need food." I pressed my forehead against the window and pretended I didn't hear them. My headphones weren't even on. I just didn't want them to know how quiet I'd become. Somewhere between the Oklahoma border and our next fuel stop, my father muttered, "She better not ruin this trip. I paid for her existence long enough. That one cut. I still paid rent at home even while working 2 jobs. But to them, that didn't matter. In their eyes, I was an embarrassment, a half-formed adult, a failed investment they'd rather not see in the family Christmas photo. 3 days into the road trip, the Suburban pulled into a place I'd never heard of. A rural Arkansas gas station with a blinking motel sign, half lit, a few plastic chairs baking in the sun, and the kind of silence that made the air feel heavier. No Wi-Fi, no signal, no escape. My mom said we'd spend the night, regroup before heading toward the Ozarks. I volunteered to check if the motel had vacancies. I think part of me still wanted to prove I could be useful needed. My dad handed me a crumpled $5 bill and said, "Here, buy yourself some self-respect." I walked into the dusty lobby, blinking back tears. The woman at the front desk had a tired kindness to her. I asked about rooms. She said there were 2 left. I thanked her and stepped back outside. The Suburban was gone. At first, I thought they were messing with me. Maybe they drove off for food, or maybe Ricky was filming some elaborate prank for his channel. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. An hour? Nothing. I went back inside, my throat dry. The clerk gave me a strange look, sympathy laced with discomfort. "They left this," she said, sliding a post-it note across the counter. It read, "Learn to walk alone. Don't call us." Just 8 words, neat measured handwriting, my mother's. I didn't cry. Not at first. I didn't scream or chase down the road. I just sat on the curb next to a Pepsi vending machine that didn't work, staring at the horizon like it might offer me a map. Something inside me went still. Night came slowly, the kind of southern dusk that drags across the pavement like syrup. The crickets started. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once, then fell silent. I must have looked like I belonged there because no one asked questions. Eventually, someone sat down beside me. He smelled faintly of old paper and peppermint gum. He wore a janitor's uniform with Solomon stitched across the chest. His voice was calm, the kind that settled your bones before your brain caught up. "You all right?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. But when I did, I told him everything. Not just about the note, but about the years that led to it. The slow, grinding humiliation. The invisible bruises from words that didn't look cruel on paper, but cut like razors. Solomon listened without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't ask for more. He just stood and said, "Come on, Elena, we'll figure it out." He led me 3 blocks down to a building with a broken porch light and a handmade sign, "Out Front Urban Outreach Shelter." And that's how it started my second life. Not with a breakthrough or a miracle, just a bunk bed with chip paint, a peanut butter sandwich, and a man who saw something in me no one else bothered to look for. I cried that night, not because I'd been abandoned, but because someone finally stayed. But what I didn't know then was that this place, this little broken shelter, was about to become the center of something much bigger than me. Because sometimes when the people who built you decide to burn the house down, you learn to build something stronger from the ashes. And that motel curb where they left me behind, that would become the first line in the story that would one day end them. The shelter wasn't what I imagined. No chaos, no yelling, no one trying to steal shoes or start fires. Just quiet exhaustion, the kind of tired that lives in your bones and settles behind your eyes. The kind of tired I knew well. Solomon walked me through the place like I was already part of it. He introduced me to Marla, the night supervisor with a raspy voice and a wrist tattoo of a sparrow. She gave me a folded blanket, a pillow that smelled faintly like lavender and sweat, and pointed toward a bunk in the corner of the women's dorm. No one looked at me like I didn't belong. That was the first time in years I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. That night I laid awake on a thin mattress with duct tape on one corner and chip paint flaking off the metal bars. It wasn't soft, but it was mine. The darkness hummed around me, full of breaths and small shifts as other women turned in their sleep. I listened to the rhythm of people who had nothing left to prove, just enough left to survive. I cried again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was slow, silent, like rain falling inside me. And then, eventually, sleep took me. The next morning, I didn't wait to be asked. I found a pair of rubber gloves, grabbed a bucket, and started scrubbing down the lobby bathroom. It was gross, sticky floors, clogged drains, soap scum so thick it felt alive. But it gave me something my family never had control. I could make something better, even if it was just a sink. I moved from bathrooms to folding donated clothes, then helped serve lunch. No one stopped me. And every time I caught Solomon watching from the hallway, he'd just nod once like he saw something I didn't yet. A week passed, then 2. No one called, no one came, no police report, no missed texts. It was like I'd been erased from my own bloodline. And maybe that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made room for something new. One afternoon, a woman came through the front doors, holding a little boy in one arm and dragging a suitcase with the other. A girl, maybe 6, clung to her leg like a lifeline. The woman's arms were bruised. Her lip had a split that hadn't healed right. She didn't speak English well, but her eyes found mine wide and shaking. "Safe," she whispered. I nodded. "You're safe here." In that moment, I stood a little taller. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like someone who could change things. Even a little. Solomon noticed. He started teaching me how the shelter worked behind the scenes, how food donations were tracked, how to order supplies through county grants, how to make sure no one took more than they needed, but everyone got enough. He handed me a clipboard one day and said, "Start with inventory. If you can make sense of this mess, we're keeping you." I did. And I didn't just sort it. I streamlined it, color-coded it, I made labels. A volunteer named Maya, who ran the accounting system part-time while raising 2 kids and juggling her own mess of a life, noticed. "You're organized as hell," she said. "You ever think about business school?" I laughed, then stopped. Because, no, I hadn't. But maybe I could, not the Ivy League fancy campus type. But something online, something real, something mine. Weeks turned into months. I still cleaned offices from midnight to 3 a.m. I saved every stipend dollar the shelter gave me. I stopped buying $6 coffees and started studying budgeting tutorials in my downtime. Maya showed me how to log expenses. Solomon taught me how to write grant letters. They were building me from the inside out. But the version of me they left behind at that gas station curb, she wasn't gone. She sat deep inside, quiet and sharp, like a needle in the lining of a coat. That part still ached, still wondered what she did to deserve it. Still pictured Ricky's smirk and Mom's narrowed eyes every time I looked in the mirror. And I knew I couldn't let it end like that. Then one gray Thursday afternoon, while I was stacking canned goods in the back pantry, a man walked in holding a heavy duffel bag. His coat was too nice for this place, wool dark tailored at the shoulders. He looked around uncertain, then spotted the soup line. "Is there a girl named Elena here?" he asked, voice low. I froze. No one had said my name in weeks. "I'm Elena," I said slowly. He nodded, then reached into his coat pocket and handed me an envelope. "She said you'd understand." I recognized the handwriting instantly. Clean, sharp, no wasted flourishes. My mother's. He left before I could say another word. The envelope sat in my hand like it was burning. I didn't open it. Not there. I carried it to Solomon's office, closed the door, and held it out to him. "I think they want me back." He didn't flinch, just leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "You have a choice now," he said. "That's what makes you different." I stared at the letter for a long time. The past wanted back in, but I wasn't the same girl they left behind anymore. I had built something, maybe not huge, maybe not polished, but it was real. Still a part of me couldn't help but wonder what was written inside. Was it an apology? A lie? A plea? I opened it, and what I read wasn't sorry, wasn't even close. It was bait, a soft hook hidden in desperation. "Lucas is struggling. Your father had surgery. We could really use your help. No, we miss you. No, we were wrong. Just this, now that you have value, we've decided you matter. And for the first time in my life, I smiled, because I knew exactly what that meant. It meant my silence had finally become louder than their noise. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I didn't reply to the letter. I didn't even keep it. I dropped it into the shelter's shred bin, watched the blade slice through every careful word. But I kept the envelope, the handwriting, the name, the proof. I labeled a small shoebox. Evidence slipped the envelope inside and pushed it to the back of my closet, not out of spite, out of strategy. The next few weeks moved fast. The shelter was expanding. A small grant we'd written with Maya's help had been approved enough to renovate the rec room and buy 2 more washers. Solomon offered me a formal role program assistant, which meant a paycheck, a nameplate, and responsibility. But more than that, it meant trust. I was no longer the girl with nowhere to go. I was part of the blueprint. Every form I filed, every meeting I sat in, was a brick laid in a life they said I wasn't capable of building. I started taking online business courses, nonprofit management, conflict resolution, community planning. I studied late into the night, my notes spread across the break room table while others slept. Some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a sweat heart pounding, thinking I was still on that motel curb waiting for headlights that never came. But now, instead of panic, I felt fire, not rage, focus. And then came the email. It was from a local paper, a reporter named Dana Watts who had heard about our shelter's work from a city council contact. She wanted to do a feature on the next generation of community leaders. I almost ignored it, but then I remembered the envelope, the silence, the years of being unseen. And I wrote her back. The interview started with the basics, how I ended up at the shelter, what we'd achieved, who inspired me. I spoke about Solomon, about the mothers who walked in with fear and left with housing applications and hope. And then slowly I told her the rest. I was left behind on a road trip, I said, voice steady. My family drove off without me, on purpose. I was 22. She paused, stunned. And they never came back. No, but that's not the story, I said. The story is what happened after. Dina asked if I wanted to remain anonymous. No, I told her. I want my name on it. The article dropped 3 days later, abandoned in Arkansas. The girl who built the shelter that saved her. My inbox exploded. Local news picked it up, then regional. People sent letters, emails, donations. Survivors wrote from halfway across the country. Women, men, even grown children who'd been left in different ways. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a mirror. But with visibility comes exposure. And it didn't take long for the hate mail to find its way home, to their home. How do I know? Because Ricky texted me. Ricky, WTF did you do? His message read, Mom can't leave the house without people staring. Dad's friends cut him off. Please take it down. You made your point. I stared at the screen for a while, not because I was surprised he reached out, but because of what he didn't say. No. Are you okay? No. Why didn't you call? Just damage control. I typed back one sentence, I'm just getting started. And I meant it, because the story wasn't over. They'd taught me I was disposable. They'd built a life where I was the flaw. But now I had the stage, the narrative, the receipts, and the power to make sure no one ever silenced me again. Solomon didn't say much about the article, just handed me a mug of terrible coffee one morning and said, told you you'd burn brighter. He was the only one who never needed the headlines to believe in me. Then came the call that would shift everything. A rep from the Northwest Community Development Fund invited us to apply for a citywide rebuilding grant. The shelter would become part of a larger initiative renovating low-income housing, creating job pipelines, trauma-informed childcare. They wanted us to co-lead the pilot. You'll need to present at the Rebuilding Futures Gala, the rep said. We'd like you to be the face of everything they thought I'd never become. I agreed. And that's when the idea first sparked not revenge in the usual sense, not fire and fury, but design, precision, redemption on my own terms. I reached out to the event's planning committee and requested access to the guest list, said we'd need it for donor acknowledgments. No one questioned it. I scrolled through hundreds of names. And then I added 2 more. Martin and Jill Penrose. My parents. They didn't know I was involved. The gala was open invitation for major donors and city partners. My LLC, named after the shelter's original street address, was listed as a private sponsor. They wouldn't suspect a thing. Until they walked in. Until they saw me. Until they realized the girl they left behind had become the gatekeeper. The Rebuilding Futures Gala was scheduled for a Saturday evening in late spring, the kind of evening where the air feels softer, like it forgives more than usual. I stood in front of the mirror in the shelter's tiny staff bathroom, adjusting a navy wrap dress I'd thrifted and tailored myself. Solomon had slipped a silver pin onto my desk that morning, a small phoenix. He didn't say anything when I found it, just winked and handed me the van keys. The venue was a renovated railway station turned civic hall, brick walls vaulted ceiling chandeliers that looked like they'd witnessed a century's worth of triumphs and failures. Maya greeted me near the entrance clipboard in one hand, latte in the other. "They printed your name on the banner," she said with a grin. "You're officially the main event." The banner read, Elena Penrose, Community Impact Leader Urban Outreach Alliance. The name didn't shake me like it used to. It was just a label now, like any other. They didn't own it anymore. By 7 p.m., the hall buzzed with donors, reporters, council members, and nonprofit partners. I shook hands with strangers who knew my story before they met my face. Some smiled like they understood. Some looked at me like I was a ghost resurrected. The guest list had been finalized earlier that week. I made sure of it. Jill and Martin Penrose were on page 3. General admission, no +1s. They wouldn't know I had any say in the matter. That was the point. At exactly 7:24, I saw them. She arrived first wearing her usual pale pink cardigan, the same one she wore to every parent-teacher conference. Her pearls looked real, but weren't. Her smile flickered the moment she saw the banner. He followed behind her, stiff in an old suit, his posture slightly hunched now. I watched from the edge of the room as their eyes scanned the crowd and then landed on me. They froze. I didn't look away. I wanted them to see. A volunteer approached them with glasses of sparkling water. My mother declined with a shake of her head. My father took one, his knuckles white around the stem. The music played on. Conversations swirled, but they stood still like people who just realized they had walked into a trap set with their own hands. At 8 honor, the MC called me to the podium. The applause felt far away, like something happening underwater. I stepped up, adjusted the mic, and let the silence build just long enough to settle. Then I smiled. "Thank you for being here tonight. This building was once a train station, a place where people left, arrived, waited, or were forgotten. Tonight it becomes something else. A place where stories converge, not just mine, but every person who's ever been left behind and dared to return on their own terms." I spoke about the shelter, how it saved me, then how I tried to return the favor. I named the mothers who inspired me, the volunteers who carried heavy things without asking for thanks. I thanked Solomon. I thanked Maya. And then, just when the room thought the story had wrapped, I inhaled slowly. "There's one more thing I want to share," I said. "Not as a worker, not as a speaker, as a witness." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. I nodded to the tech team. The projector screen behind me flickered on. First came a grainy photo, an old parking lot outside a highway motel. The timestamp in the corner read 3:47 p.m. My suitcase sat next to a vending machine. On top was a note scribbled in permanent marker. It read, "Learn to walk alone. Don't call us." I didn't look at the screen. I looked at them. My parents. My voice didn't tremble. This is what I was left with. No ride, no money, no explanation. Just silence and a sidewalk. The crowd fell still. Then photo after photo began to roll me at the shelter, scrubbing floors, serving meals, attending my first online class. A slideshow, not of pity, but of process, transformation, intention. They laughed when they left me. They said I'd never survive. But I didn't just survive. I built. And now they don't recognize the door because they never imagined I could own the building. The final slide read, "Penrose Family Fund, $0. Status revoked on moral grounds." And then the curtain lifted. Behind it, a large ceremonial check wheeled out on a carte blank, except for $1 in the corner. The memo read, "4 services rendered, teaching me what not to be." The applause started hesitantly, then grew like a storm. But I wasn't looking at the audience. I was watching my mother's mouth fall open, my father's jaw lock into place like it always did, when he wanted to seem bigger than he felt. And then I saw something rare, fear. They had always believed they held the pen to my story. Tonight they realized I was the one writing the ending. After the event, while the crowd trickled out and the lights dimmed, they approached me. My mother stepped forward first. "Elena," she said barely above a whisper. "This wasn't." I raised my hand. "If you speak to me, I will make sure this entire city knows everything. I have letters, records, eyewitnesses. This is your second chance. Use it to disappear." My father tried to puff himself up. "We didn't deserve this." I leaned in close enough for only them to hear, and I didn't deserve to be left on the side of the road. We're even. I handed them an envelope. Inside the $1 check. No signature, just a sticky note with a smiley face. They left without another word. My mother's heels clicked down the hallway like a countdown. My father didn't look back. Outside, under the soft glow of the parking lot, lights I exhaled for the first time in hours. Maya joined me, her eyes glassy, but proud. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I think I finally am." But as I opened the back of the van and reached for my heels, I noticed something tucked beneath the windshield wiper. A letter, no return address, just my name, handwritten. Not my mother's handwriting, not my father's, but familiar. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, like something you'd get from a wedding or a college acceptance letter. My name was written in small, careful script, tight lettering, not my mother's sharp strokes or my father's blunt block letters. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. It was Ricky's. My stomach turned not with fear, but with something colder, anticipation. I stood there for a moment under the orange glow of the parking lot, light the sounds of the gala dying behind me. Solomon was still inside, probably making his usual slow lap, saying goodbyes, checking tables. I tore the envelope open with one finger and pulled out a single sheet. The writing was smudged near the top like he'd started once, then stopped. "Lena," it began. No one else called me that. Only him. I don't know what to say that won't sound like a weak excuse. So, maybe I'll just say what I remember. I remember when we used to race to the mailbox every Saturday. I remember when you used to help me cheat on my Spanish quizzes. And I remember when I laughed that day in the van. I laughed because I didn't think they were serious. I thought we'd circle back. I thought it was a joke. But we didn't, and they didn't, and I didn't stop it. I sat in the driver's seat, heart thudding, scanning each line. I didn't come to the gala because I thought you'd throw me out too. And maybe you should. I've been silent for years, and I guess that makes me worse. But I just wanted you to know I saw your speech, and for the first time, I didn't feel smug or angry. I felt ashamed. Not because people hate us now, but because they're right. No apology, no request, just acknowledgement. And somehow that cut deeper. I folded the letter and tucked it into the shoebox labeled evidence. But this one, I wrote something different on the back, truth, finally. Then I placed it under the others. It didn't undo what had been done, but it marked something, a crack in the armor. The next day, I didn't wake up with fire. I woke up with quiet, a stillness that settled like snow. I walked into the shelter early before the coffee pot had even finished percolating. Solomon was already there polishing the front window with slow, methodical strokes. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. "You're glowing," he said. "No, just tired." He chuckled. "That's the same thing around here." I told him about the letter. I didn't cry. I didn't soften it. I just said the words, and he listened like he always did without trying to fix it. That was his magic. Not answers, but space. Later that week, I got a call from a nonprofit publisher who'd read the news coverage. They wanted me to write a piece about reclaiming identity after family estrangement. I said yes before I had time to talk myself out of it. The words came easier than I expected. Not polished, not literary, just honest. I wrote about silent survival and the power of building something no one else thought you could. I ended it with a line I hadn't planned. Sometimes the most radical act of healing is refusing to disappear. The article went semi-viral, at least in the nonprofit world. More messages came in, some from people like me, some from people like Ricky, but none from my parents. They'd gone quiet, maybe out of shame, maybe out of strategy. I didn't care. What I cared about was the next chapter, because that's when the real opportunity came. The city council announced a new initiative to transform vacant lots into youth centers and community kitchens, and they were looking for advisory board members with lived experience in housing insecurity. Solomon nudged me to apply. Maya offered to help with the application. Greg, our volunteer accountant, offered to vouch for me with the mayor's staff. At first, I hesitated. Part of me still felt like the girl on the curb, afraid of being noticed for the wrong reasons. But another part of me, stronger now, knew this was exactly the kind of door I needed to walk through. So I did. 2 weeks later, I got the call. I was in. I wasn't just running a shelter anymore. I was helping reshape how our city cared for people like me. People who were written off, cast out, handed broken compasses, and told to find their way. At the press conference, I wore the same navy dress from the gala, not because it was fancy, but because it reminded me who I was when I decided I deserved more. A reporter asked if my family was proud. I smiled without hesitation. "I think I'm proud enough for all of us," I said. But pride isn't the same as peace. Because that night when I got back to the shelter, there was someone waiting by the front steps, hoodie up, shoulders hunched, looking down at his shoes like they held a secret. It was Ricky. He looked smaller than I remembered. Ricky always had this cocky slouch in high school, like the world owed him a trophy just for waking up. But now, standing on the shelter steps in an old hoodie and worn-out sneakers, he looked dimmed, like someone who'd been running too long in the wrong direction. I didn't move, just stared. My keys were still in my hand, the metal pressing into my palm. He glanced up at me like he expected to be hit. "Hey," he said, voice rough, not from emotion, but maybe from exhaustion. I waited. "I figured you'd slam the door in my face," he added, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I still might," I said. That made him half smile, but it faded just as fast. "I don't want anything," he said quickly, holding his hands up like I'd accused him already. "Not money, not a place to crash. He exhaled hard. "I just needed to see you." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I finally stepped past him, unlocked the front door, and pushed it open. "You've got 5 minutes. Inside, not out here." He followed me into the small staff lounge. It smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. The hum of the soda fridge was the only sound for a while. He sat on the edge of a folding chair, fidgeting with the drawstrings of his hoodie. "I know what you think, that I'm just here because the story went viral, because the family name is radioactive now." "You're not wrong," I said. He flinched. "But I added you showed up, so talk." He nodded slowly. "Mom's still playing the victim. Tells anyone who'll listen that you twisted everything for attention. Dad barely leaves the house. Keeps talking about suing someone, but he doesn't even know who. I moved out. Been couch surfing for a few weeks. And you came here why I asked." He looked down at his hands. "Because I can't stop seeing your face at that motel. The way you looked back at us as we drove off. I thought we'd come back for you. I really did. I told myself we would." "You didn't," I said. "I didn't," he echoed. Something in his voice cracked then. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know what I remember most. Not the trip, not the shelter, the silence afterward. You didn't call, you didn't scream, you just vanished. And I told myself that meant you were fine. But I knew better. I always knew. I didn't respond, my throat was tight, but I kept my face still. I'd practiced this moment for years in the mirror, and I wasn't going to let emotion rewrite the script. "You don't get a clean slate," I said finally. "Not just because you say the right regrets out loud. I know. But," I took a breath. "You were a kid too, and I know what it's like to grow up believing that love is conditional, that you have to earn it. I just stopped believing it sooner." He looked up at me, eyes red but dry. "Is there anything I can do?" I almost said no, almost told him to walk out and let this be the closure, but something tugged inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a thread of possibility. "There's a volunteer shift on Thursday," I said, "sorting donations. Heavy lifting, no recognition, no cameras." He blinked. "You want me to volunteer?" "No," I said. "I want to see if you'll show up." He nodded slowly like that meant more than any hug ever could. Then he stood. "I will, I swear." I watched him walk out into the night, shoulders still hunched, but not in shame this time. More like someone ready to carry a little weight that wasn't just his own. That night, I stayed up late in the office, staring at a wall of sticky notes I'd made for a new project proposal. One that would connect youth who'd aged out of foster care with mentorship programs and emergency housing. The kind of program I wish had existed when I was 22 and invisible. Solomon knocked once before stepping in. "He leave?" "Yeah." He nodded, leaned on the doorframe. "You okay?" "Getting there." He smiled. "Then keep going." I added one last sticky note before I left that night. It said, "Blood doesn't always mean family, but choice. That's where the real family begins." The next morning, I got a message on our shelter's email. Subject line, "Media request, national interest." A producer from a major network wanted to do a televised feature, not just a spotlight and in-depth profile. They said the public wanted the full story, and they wanted to include a reunion segment. Live with your family, I read the email 3 times each word, feeling heavier than the last. A national spotlight, a televised reunion, a chance, they said, to close the loop. As if closure were something you could script and broadcast between ad breaks. They offered to fly my parents out, cover hair and makeup, even pre-interview them to soften the narrative. They promised sensitivity, balance, healing, all the corporate words that sound kind but aren't. It was never about me. It was about ratings. I didn't reply. For 2 days, I walked around with the offer like a stone in my shoe. At the shelter, I helped with meal prep, mentored a new intake coordinator, and quietly observed Ricky during his second volunteer shift. He was quiet, careful. He didn't complain, he didn't brag. And when one of the younger kids spilled a box of canned goods, he knelt down and helped clean it up without saying a word. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Not because I said yes, but because I hadn't said no. Solomon noticed. He always did. "What's eating you?" he asked over cold tamales and lukewarm coffee in the staff room. I told him about the offer. He didn't flinch, just chewed slowly. Then, "What would the girl on the motel curb want you to do?" "She wanted to be seen." He nodded, then see her, and decide from there. So I sat alone that night and rewatched a video I'd secretly saved a security cam clip from the shelter's earliest days. Me dragging a bag of clothes twice my size, trying not to cry. Clarence walking up behind me, his hand barely touching my shoulder. Not a rescue, just presence. That's what changed everything. It wasn't the moment I was found. It was the moment I stopped apologizing for being left. So I made my choice. I emailed the producer back. I said yes, but on one condition: they wouldn't be part of the reunion. Not my parents, not my mother's pearl-clad martyr act, not my father's bitter scowl. If they wanted to film something, it would be here at the shelter, with the people who built me. They agreed after some back and forth. That might actually be more powerful, the associate producer finally said. Audiences love transformation arcs. But this wasn't about them. It never really had been. On the day of filming, I wore no makeup, just jeans, a clean button-up, and the Phoenix pin Solomon gave me. The crew was respectful, 2 camera operators, 1 sound tech, and a field interviewer named Danny. She looked like someone's cousin, with messy curls, and a voice that didn't try too hard. "Just talk to me," she said gently. "Forget the camera." So I did. I talked about the motel, the shelter, the silence, the rage, the work. I mentioned Ricky without naming him, and his slow road to understanding. I talked about Clarence and how sometimes the right sentence from the right person can rewire your entire sense of worth. At the end, Danny asked, "Do you forgive them?" I paused, then smiled. "That's not the goal. I didn't build all this to find forgiveness. I built it so no one else has to start from nothing." She nodded. "And if they're watching," I looked into the camera steady. "Then I hope they learn what I did. That love isn't earned through perfection or obedience. It's a choice you keep making even when it's hard." They packed up quietly. No big dramatic hugs, no fake tears, just truth recorded. That night I got a voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky but rehearsed. "I saw the interview. I didn't expect you to say it like that. Your father's been sick, and Lucas, he's lost his job. We're trying. I hope you're okay." No apology, no acknowledgement of the note on the motel curb. Just her same lifelong habit of skimming past consequences and calling it love. I didn't call back, but I saved the message. The story aired 3 days later. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Strangers sent notes, survivors of family estrangement, social workers, foster youth. Some were angry, some grateful. Some just said, "I didn't know I needed to hear this until I did." The mayor's office sent an invitation, an awards ceremony for civic leadership. Solomon made me go. Maya cried through the whole thing. When I stepped on stage, I didn't bring a speech. Instead, I brought a photo, a printout of the motel curb, my suitcase in the shot, the napkin note barely legible. "This is where I started," I told the crowd. "And if I could go back to that girl sitting on that curb, I'd tell her, 'You are not the problem. You're just in the wrong story.'" I didn't know how many people clapped. I wasn't listening for it. Afterward in the hall, Ricky met me by the juice table. That was real. I nodded. "You think there's hope for people like us?" he asked quietly. I looked around at the families gathering near the community board we'd just unveiled, at the kids racing down the hall, at Solomon holding a paper plate of lemon bars beaming like a proud uncle. "There's more than hope," I said. "There's proof." And just when I thought that was the final page, a courier walked in holding a small sealed box. "For Elena Penrose," he said. There was no return label, just a sticker with 3 words printed neatly. "We remember everything." Story 2. I was folding damp towels in Grandma Helen's cramped farmhouse kitchen just before dawn, steam rising from the porcelain sink, when I smelled it, a sharp chemical tang that turned my stomach to ice. Noah sat at the chipped pine table, his little shoulders hunched over a sketchbook, pencils scattered like soldiers at ease. He hummed softly his safe practice tune. Then came the scream, jagged and raw. "Mommy, my eye." The towel slipped from my fingers and slapped the floor. My heart vaulted out of my chest as I barreled around the island. Noah lay curled by the leg, one hand pressed to his face, his breath ripping in and out like a wounded bird's. I tore his fingers away and froze bright red industrial glue caked between his lashes, glinting under the single bare bulb overhead. Maya stood at the pantry door, arms crossed and face calm as a marble statue. He stared at me. "Funny," she said, voice flat. "Kids stare." He needed boundaries. Cold rage roared through me, hot enough to burn my lungs. I yanked the glue bottle from her fingers, tacky half empty, and smashed it against the counter. White plastic shards scattered like broken promises. Maya just shrugged eyes, bored. Grandma Helen laughed, popcorn rattling in her lap. "Well, at least his hair won't go messy," she quipped, voice dripping amusement. Grandpa Robert didn't even glance over his glasses. The rustle of the newspaper was his only comment. I scooped Noah into my arms and fled down the scuffed hallway, slamming bathroom door behind me. The lock clicked. It sounded like freedom and prison all at once. Steam fogged the tiny mirror as I turned the tap from scalding to ice cold, then back again. Water sluiced over Noah's lashes, red, mixing into cloudy rivulets. He whimpered, body trembling against my chest, until the tremors stilled and he sagged limply into sleep. I stayed beside him on the cold tile, the thin crack of morning light slicing through the frosted window until my eyelids refused to stay open. When I woke, the kitchen was silent, too silent. The wallpaper's faded roses stared down like witnesses. I dressed Noah in his softest sweatshirt hair, still damp, and carried him to the front door. Outside, the gravel drive gleamed with frost. Maya's voice drifted from the dark house. "Stop being dramatic, Sarah. He's fine." Grandma Helen's tone cut sharper. "You'll flood the floor if you don't open up." Rage and fear wrestled beneath my ribs, but I felt a steady calm bloom in my chest. This was the moment I chose. I shouldered our duffel bag, no more than 2 ratty blankets, a toothbrush, some crayons, and stepped into the pale morning. This, I whispered to Maya's retreating silhouette, lifting Noah a little higher, "is my rent." I turned away from the jeers and slammed the door. My footsteps crunched down the gravel, each one a promise never again. The country road unrolled before me in long, empty miles. Noah stirred against me, eyes half open, gaze glazed with pain and confusion. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a steady breath of cold air. We walked 4 miles to Buckeye Urgent Care under an angry sky wind, whipping the bare branches like frantic arms. Every mile felt like a battle won. Inside the clinic, fluorescent lights buzzed low over vinyl chairs. The nurse blinked at Noah's eye-red, swollen dripping, and her professional mask slipped for a heartbeat. "What happened?" she asked, voice gentle. I drew in a breath so deep my lungs burned, then said 2 words. Chemical burn. Her pen scratched across the clipboard. "No permanent damage expected, antibiotic drops for 1 week, total cost $32.50. I handed over every cent I had, watching the nurse bag the tiny bottle in white paper. That night, we buried ourselves in a friend's dusty garage, an ancient futon stiff with motor oil and memories. Noah clutched his sketchbook eyes closed tight as if the dark could shield him. I pressed a kiss to his hair, his breath softening as sleep took him. I slipped out to sit under the single bare bulb legs, folded tight, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I thought of Maya's smug face, of Grandma's chuckle, of Grandpa's indifference. The world outside was still turning full of people who'd never feel the weight in my chest, who'd never understand why I couldn't go back. But I would find a way forward. I'd trade this rusted garage for a room of our own. I'd learn how to rebuild a broken heart. Somewhere past midnight, I heard my phone buzz a notification from Maya's Glam by Maya Channel. A new video titled Healing Glow-Up Secrets. Her face beamed back at me in the dim light. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to scream at her, "You monster!" But I stayed still. Instead, I tapped block. In the quiet that followed, wind hissed through the cracks in the garage door, and I felt a small flame of something fierce rise inside. Not hate exactly, a promise. I would protect Noah. I would teach Maya what it means to cross a mother. I would turn our story into something stronger than their cruelty. I crept back into the dark where Noah slept, pressed my palm to his heart, and whispered, "I've got you." The garage door rattled behind me like a threat. I pulled the blankets higher until only his face peeked out. I closed my eyes, imagining a new life beyond those battered walls. And then I heard the scrape of boots on gravel. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Someone was walking toward the garage in the cold night. I stared through the dusty window breath, fogging the glass. A figure paused under the lone lamppost, tall, familiar. My throat tightened. I didn't know whether to open the door or run deeper into darkness. My instincts screamed both. The lamp flickered. Rain spat against the roof. "Noah," I whispered. The figure lifted a phone video light cutting through the night. I recognized that smug smile. Maya. She wasn't done with us yet. My pulse spiked and the garage felt too small. The door rattled again. I had to decide, fight or flee. I hugged Noah close, feeling his small chest rise and fall, and swallowed the terror knotting my throat. Some promises demand a reckoning, and mine was just beginning. I stumbled out of the garage before dawn, Noah tucked tight against my chest, his breath shallow beneath my jacket. The air was thick with motor oil and damp earth, and every scrape of my boots on gravel felt like a countdown. I dared not look back at Bill's auto repair, where rusted fenders loomed like silent sentinels, and neither did I dare face Maya's smug video light. I held Noah's hand as we crossed the empty lot, the horizon a pale promise of safety, somewhere beyond that broken-down door. We walked until the first yellow lamps of Maple Street Diner winked awake. Inside, chrome stools gleamed under neon, and the hum of the grill was a heartbeat I could cling to. I slid onto a stool in the corner booth, cradling Noah and wrapping him in my arms. The waitress, an older woman named Doris, with silver hair and gentle eyes, placed 2 coffees and a plate of toast before me, without a word. She must have seen my hands trembling. Noah's eyelid twitched as he stirred hooded gaze, flicking from the griddle to me. I forced a smile and whispered, "It's over." But my voice caught on shards of fear. I wasn't sure it was. I spent the next hour filling out a job application under flickering light dishwasher, opening shift, any shift. I remembered my college diploma for child development, but here my worth meant scrubbing plates. Doris slipped in behind the counter and murmured to the cook, who nodded and winked at me. They must have seen a mother fighting to survive. By the time the sun bled orange through the diner window, I had my first shift tonight, 5 to close. They handed me a crinkled schedule sheet, weekends too, and double shifts if I could. I tucked it into my pocket and ruffled Noah's hair. "He needs to rest," I told Doris. She pointed to a small back room where a worn couch waited. Noah curled up, clutching his sketchbook. I watched him drift off, lips parting, lashes heavy. Then I washed my first stack of plates, water hot enough to burn, grease thick enough to choke. Each plate was a small victory, each rinse a prayer. By the time the lunch rush rolled in, I was soaked in sweat and determination. Patrons hardly noticed me, but when I passed coffee refills, their eyes met mine with a flicker of gratitude. Even the roughest trucker nodded once. It was the first human connection I'd felt in days. After my shift, I guided Noah to the bus stop at the crossroads. The ticket machine ate my last $5, and I pressed him close as the old bus rattled in. The driver, a man in his 60s with a county sheriff's cap, helped me hoist Noah aboard and said, "Stay warm, kid." The ride to the downtown shelter was a jarring collage of cracked sidewalks and boarded-up windows. I wondered how many dreams had died in these streets, how many people like me clung to hope by fingernails. At the shelter, we were assigned a thin mattress in a hall with 20 others. A clock ticked loudly in the corner. Noah reached for my hand. I squeezed back wordless promise. That night, I lay awake listening to murmured confessions, the rustle of blankets. I thought of Maya's laugh, the echo of Grandma's popcorn crunch, Grandpa's newspaper rustle. The world felt both smaller and larger. Smaller because we had nothing, larger because everything was at stake. I closed my eyes and pictured a life where we had a front door that locked a room with curtains no glue in sight. It felt like a country I'd never reach, but I'd walk every mile to get there. Morning brought a trembling flyer hung by the bulletin board, affordable rooms for rent. 500-month call, Joe. I dialed with numb fingers. Joe's gravelly voice promised a small upstairs room above his auto parts store just 6 blocks from the diner. I made it clear I needed something safe somewhere Noah could draw heroes instead of nightmares. He promised me stability, no questions asked. I scribbled the address on my palm and rushed out to catch the bus back. At the address, the store sign read, Joe's Auto Parts and Repair, and a narrow staircase led up beside the showroom window. The room was tiny bare wood floor, one dusty window overlooking a chain-link fence, but it had a lock on the door. I imagined hanging a faded curtain and laying Noah's sketchbook on a small table by the sill. Joe handed me the key with a nod. First month's rent on Friday. I swallowed hard. Yes. He smiled. You'll make it. His confidence felt like a gift. Back at Maple Street Diner, I collected extra shifts opening on weekdays, closing on weekends. I made sure Noah got breakfast at Doris's counter before heading to the public library's children's hour where he could color without fear. I pored over brochures for Columbus Community College's night classes and trauma response. Tuition was $200 per course. I scraped together what I could, hoping to enroll in the fall term. My arms ached, my eyes burned from late-night studying, but every minute felt like building a bridge to a new world. Then came the twist I hadn't seen coming. One evening I found an envelope slipped under my door. No stamp, no return address, a single sheet of tinted paper. Inside, in neat block letters, was one line, "He's not safe here." My fingers trembled and I looked up at the window, its single pane reflecting the empty street lamp. Was it Maya's game? Grandma's vengeance? My pulse pounded louder than the diner's grill. I stuffed the note into my pocket and bolted outside. The street was deserted, the night too quiet. As I hurried toward the diner for my closing shift, headlights swept past the auto parts store, slowed, then sped off. I froze. The license plate was out of focus, but the car felt familiar, a late-model black SUV too sleek for rural roads. Heart slamming, I gripped Noah's hand, half expecting it to vanish. But the SUV turned the corner and disappeared into darkness. I exhaled shaky relief, bleeding into dread. Inside the diner, I scrubbed dishes until my knuckles bled and my thoughts looped on that note. He's not safe here. I replayed it in my head, searching for hidden meaning, any clue. Was it a warning or a threat? Outside, the neon open 24 hours sign flickered, its rhythm matching my pulse. I thought of Maya's blocked username, of Joe's promise, of Doris's kindness. Could any of it shield us from whatever was coming? I stacked the last plate and paused in the fluorescent glare. The door chimed with a new customer. I turned and froze. Standing in the entrance was Joe, keyring in hand, eyes narrowed. "Mind if I talk?" he asked. His voice was low, urgent. I swallowed, unsure whether to let him in or run back to that empty room. Noah stirred behind me, small and trusting. Joe stepped closer, and I saw the flicker of something in his gaze, concern, or maybe warning. The din of sizzling grease and clinking silverware faded around us. I swallowed again, bracing for the words that would change everything. Joe's eyes flicked past me to Noah, and my heart thudded. This was no casual landlord visit. He set the keyring on the counter, the metal keys clinking like a warning. "Sarah," he said softly, voice low, "that note, you weren't the only one to get it." My fists clenched, knuckles whitening. "What do you mean?" He glanced toward the back room where Noah slept, curled on the couch, sketchbook in hand. "Someone's been watching you. I've seen a black SUV circling the block 3 nights in a row. Yesterday I caught its engine idling outside the shelter. The din of the fryer and clatter of cutlery faded, and I realized my pulse was thundering so loud I could barely hear him. He leaned in face, inches from mine. "I ran your credit for the rental, found a lien you didn't know about. It was cleared decades ago, but someone reactivated it last week." My stomach lurched. Why? Joe shook his head. "To scare you out." He straightened and pulled a folded photo from his coat pocket. Grainy shot from a distance, Maya's profile hair, pulled back phone, raised toward my door. "She's got resources, Sarah." My mind ricocheted, sponsorship money, social media fame. She could afford private investigators. I felt the old panic rise, but this time I crushed it down. I slid the photo into my pocket and exhaled. "What do you want from me?" His jaw tightened. "I want to help. I've got family in law enforcement. I can get you a restraining order, but you'll need proof." My gaze dropped to the keys still resting on the counter. The lock on my door felt useless against someone with Maya's drive. I swallowed. "I don't want the police involved without certainty. They'll take Noah away." Joe's brow furrowed. "Or they'll protect him. You've got to decide which you trust more, a judge or your sister." The echo of childhood taught me to fear authority, but I weighed it against who'd actually hurt me. I nodded slowly. "Okay. Help me gather evidence." He gave a curt nod and slid out his phone. GPS logs, photos, insurance receipts for the SUV, already stored under a contact named Watchdog. My stomach twisted. He'd been protecting me without my asking. "We start tonight," he whispered. "She'll strike before dawn." The clock chimed 7. They'd closed the diner, but the neon sign still buzzed outside. I wiped my hands on my apron and dug my notebook from my pocket. Page after page, class notes, appointment reminders. For community college contact numbers, for Doris at the diner, Joe the shelter coordinator. My life had become a ledger of survival. Joe crouched by the back room door so Noah wouldn't wake. "We'll set up one camera outside your window," he said, voice hushed. He produced a small cylindrical device no bigger than a marker. Motion activated, records two-way audio. My chest tightened, but resolve bloomed. I slid the bolt lock across the door. Later, as I tucked Noah under a thin blanket, I whispered, "Mom's going to make this right." He blinked up at me, big blue eyes still rimmed pink. He yawned and smiled sleepy. Like Hero Mom, I kissed his forehead. Exactly like that. I crept back to the kitchen, where Joe was wiring the camera near the window that overlooked the empty street. Outside, streetlights painted the pavement in pools of gold. I held my breath as he snapped it into place. "That's your eye, any car, any footstep." He tapped the lens. "We'll see everything." He handed me a second device, my turn. "You keep this on you," he said. "Voice recorder. If she speaks, we get it." I slipped it into my pocket fist, closing around it. Then I realized I had a walkie-talkie and an old two-way radio in the garage from Bill's shop, plus a backup phone. I could call Doris or the shelter coordinator in an instant. I felt the weight of community settle in around me, quiet alliances I hadn't acknowledged. We stood in that cramped kitchen like partners in a spy novel, only stakes were real. I glanced at the window, the street lay silent, but the night smelled of gasoline and promise. That's when I noticed the broken slat on the wooden siding, below the sill, a tiny gap jagged like a broken promise, perfect for someone to slip a wire, a note, or glue. A siren wailed in the distance, rising then fading. I flinched. Joe's hand touched my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly, jaw tight. "Just ready." He held up his phone, 11:48 p.m. I ran a hand through my hair that I'd promised myself would never hide in shame again. We circled the table, voices hushed. He tested comm channels. I checked battery levels. The clock ticked toward midnight. I slid my apron off. Now I felt more vulnerable in regular clothes, jeans, and a sweatshirt than I ever had in dish gloves. Joe straightened ahead, swiveling toward the window. Here he whispered, "Keep your phone on silent. I'll call when it activates." I sank onto a stool, the camera lens aimed at me beneath the window. The pale light of Joe's laptop reflected off stainless steel pots. A single bulb overhead buzzed. I pictured Maya's face, beautiful, confident, unrepentant. She thought she could toy with me, scare me back into that house. But I'd built a fortress of small victories. At precisely 12:03 a.m., the camera light blinked. I jumped heart vaulting. Joe peered at his phone. Activity detected. He tapped the screen, an image-dark shape moving at the far edge of the porch light's glow. My breath caught. I edged to the window, careful not to jostle the camera. Beyond the frosted glass, a figure knelt by the foundation. A hand reached through the broken slat, low and deliberate. I felt a surge of protective fury. "That's her," I hissed. Joe held up his phone, the dim outline of Maya's profile hair, pulled back the same phone in hand. He started recording audio. I reached for the walkie-talkie clipped to my belt. "Doris," I whispered. "Camera's live. I'll talk, stay by the phone." Footsteps shuffled. I pressed my back to the counter, breath shallow. In the street, tires crunched on gravel too loud. Maya stood dusting her jeans, face a mask of defiance even in shadow. She spoke softly, voice muffled, but unmistakable. "You thought you could run, Sarah, but you can't hide from family." My blood ran ice cold. I clicked the recorder. "Maya, step away," I said clearly. Her head snapped toward the window. For a heartbeat, the world stilled, her eyes fierce and cunning, staring straight at me. Then she turned and vanished into the darkness. The porch light flicked off. In the stunned silence, I heard my own pulse and Joe's breath catching. I hit play on the recorder. Maya's voice, crisp and mocking, filled the room. I swallowed and exhaled, fists unclenching. Evidence, solid proof. But then the front door jingled with a key in the lock. My heart seized. We weren't alone. I pivoted toward the noise, toward another twist, waiting beyond the door. The camera blinked off, and in the dim light, I saw a silhouette behind the frosted glass. Whoever it was, they held something in their hand, a small envelope, edges stained pink. I raised my voice into the walkie-talkie. "Doris, stay, don't call yet." My knees shook. The door handle rattled. "Sarah," a voice whispered from the other side, soft, familiar. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know if I wanted to open it. And then the lock clicked, slow and deliberate. The door swung open and a tall man in a Navy sheriff's uniform filled the frame. My heart slammed against my ribs. Fear and relief tangled in my throat. He stepped inside, boots silent on the linoleum. "Sarah Thompson." His voice was low but kind. Behind him, Joe slipped into the kitchen, the motion-activated camera perched on the windowsill, blinking green. I clutched Noah closer, cold sweat prickling down my spine. "Yes," I whispered, voice small. "What's happening?" The deputy lifted a badge, then shifted a folder onto the counter. "We received your call and the evidence you provided. The restraining order against your sister has been granted. I'm here to serve it to Maya Jenkins." Relief surged like ice suddenly melting. I exhaled, feeling some weight lift. Joe let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. "That means she has to stay away," he said softly. The deputy nodded. "She must maintain at least 500 feet distance, no contact in person or online. Any violation, call 911 immediately." He folded the papers and handed them to me, official seal judge's signature. I ran my thumb over the embossed stamp. It felt real. Noah stirred in my arms, rubbing his good eye. I bent to kiss his hair. "You're safe," I murmured, though my chest still trembled. The deputy checked his cruiser radio. "Be advised the supervisor confirms Jenkins is at large but aware of order." He looked up. "You'll get a copy in the mail. Keep it on you at all times." I tucked the papers into my apron pocket, heart fluttering. "Thank you," I managed. Outside, the neon "Open 24 Hours" sign buzzed, casting a pink glow through the window. It felt like a beacon. The deputy tipped his hat and left. I watched him go, then slid to the floor, exhaling hard. Joe crouched beside me. "That's one battle," he said, voice gentle. "But I've got more news." His phone buzzed. He tapped at a text from Kelly, the social worker. "CPS referral filed by Maya for neglect investigation tomorrow morning. She claims you're living in unsafe conditions." My stomach dropped. Cold fear washed over me. I covered Noah's ears when his eyes widened. "Neglect," I echoed. "She's accusing me." My voice cracked. He nodded. "They're sending an investigator at 8 a.m. This isn't about glue, it's about your living situation. That garage, the shelter, the low-rent room." Rage flared hot and sharp. Maya was trying to weaponize the system, the very thing I'd feared as a child. I stood pacing. Every inch of that cramped kitchen felt too small to think. Pots clanged on the stove. The world outside was still turning, strangers, sipping coffee, never guessing the fight happening here. "What do we do?" I asked, voice trembling, but determined. Joe straightened. "We prepare. Gather proof, your lease agreement, rent receipts." Joe's statement on the room's safety inspection photos, of the premises shelter records showing you registered with them, and that restraining order. He flicked off the camera's indicator light. "We need a folder ready for CPS. We'll show them you're doing everything you can for Noah." I nodded, mind racing. I had the lease for Joe's room, rent checks, bank statements, every dollar tracked in my little ledger. I could print shelter intake forms, school sign-in sheets for the art therapy group. I remembered Doris at the diner had offered to testify I brought Noah in for breakfast every morning, and the college registrar could confirm I'm enrolled in night classes. I sank onto a stool, pulling out my worn notebook. "We'll start now," I said, flipping to the first page where I had scribbled evidence. I read aloud, "Lease signed March 3rd. Rent paid in full to Joe. Maple Street diner schedule attached. Buckeye urgent care prescription for drops. Community college enrollment. Art therapy attendance." Joe scanned the list. "Add phone logs showing you blocked Maya, the audio of her threat, the camera footage time-stamped." He tapped his phone. "I'll download the files now and burn them to a flash drive." My pulse steadied. We had momentum again. Noah stirred and reached for the sketchbook on the counter. He traced the edge with small fingers. I squeezed his hand. "Sweetheart, can you get me your therapy folder? It's the blue one by the couch." He scampered off, clutching his folder, a thin binder filled with weekly art sheets and child-friendly worksheets. I flipped to the front, the clinic's letterhead, and his therapist's name, Dr. Nguyen, confirming twice weekly visits. By the time the clock neared midnight, we had a neat stack paper-printed photos, digital evidence on 2 flash drives. I labeled one for CPS and the other legal. My eyes stung, but I felt a fierce pride. I was arming myself with truth. Joe stood stretching. "You should rest," he said. "Get some sleep before 8 a.m. I shook my head. Not yet. I stared at the pile of documents. This stack was my armor. I want to write a cover letter, state my case. No tears. Facts only. He nodded. Good plan. He handed me a pen. I opened my notebook to a blank page and began to write in neat, determined script. I introduced myself, summarized my situation, outlined the restraining order, and Maya's threats described our living arrangements and closed with a plea. For the safety and well-being of my son, I asked for confirmation that our current housing meets state standards. I signed it Sarah Thompson, mother and sole provider. My hand shook, but I finished. Joe printed it on diner letterhead, anonymous enough to look official, real enough to show community support. At 1 a.m., we locked the front door. The camera lens glowed faintly. Outside, the air was crisp and still. I hugged Noah in his pajamas. His breath was warm on my cheek. "Mom, are we okay?" he whispered. I stroked his hair. "We're going to be fine," I promised, a voice steady. "I'm making sure of it." He nodded, eyes heavy, then slept. I watched him for a long moment, the steady rise of his chest, the peaceful slack of his features. Then, I packed our folder into my purse, slid the flash drive into my pocket, and double-checked the restraining order in my apron. In the faint glow from the streetlight, the broken slat in the siding still gaped like a secret. I crouched to inspect it, tracing the jagged edge with a fingertip. No sign of fresh tampering. I stood, dusted my jeans, and pulled my sweatshirt tighter. I turned to Joe. "Thank you," I said quietly. He gave a small nod. "Call me if anything changes. I'll be here." He slipped away into the night as I closed the door behind him. The camera's green light blinked once, then stayed dark. I flicked off the kitchen light and led Noah down the hall to our small room. Every step echoed. I lay beside him, clutching my purse like a lifeline. The envelope he'd left by the door earlier, stained pink at the edges, lay on the nightstand. I picked it up, heart thudding, and noticed faint handwriting inside. "You can't protect him forever." My breath caught. I stared at the door, listening for whispers beyond the walls. The house was silent. Too silent. I tucked the envelope into my purse. Sleep had no claim on me. Dawn would bring CPS. I needed to be ready. Some battles can't wait for daylight. And tomorrow, the real fight begins.